Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. Today's guest is Ian Cockerill, the Executive Chairman of Petmin. Ian, welcome to the show. You were born and educated in the UK, but you've been involved in mining in South Africa for nearly 4 decades. When you enrolled for a BSc in Geology in the London University in 1972, did you ever contemplate such a career in South Africa?
I must confess, when I first went to university, I had no idea of where I would ultimately land up. And when I first had the opportunity to come out to South Africa in 1975, I guess my initial thoughts were, come here for a couple of years, see what it's like, and then move on somewhere else. But I have to say, when the red dust of Africa gets in your veins, it's very difficult to get it out. And I have to say, I've lived longer in Africa than I've lived in the UK, and I thoroughly enjoy Africa. It's a wonderful place to be, and I think in the type of field that I'm involved in, the natural resources as well as my interests in conservation, I can't think of anywhere better in the world in which to be based.
How did you get involved with Anglo-American?
Well, when I first came out to South Africa in 75, I initially worked for Union Corporation. But my association with the Anglo-American group actually started at the beginning of 1979 when I joined De Beers, and I became a technical assistant at De Beers, the Clainsea operations in Port Nolloth. My wife and I had just got married, so I took her all the way across the country. We landed up in Clainsea, and I had 2 years at De Beers, and they sent me on to university to get a qualification in mining. Then I came back and I was sent to the gold division of Anglo-American, and that really started, I guess, my long exposure to the gold sector.
But you also, as you said, studied further, and some of these institutions included Oxford and UNISA. How important do you think it is to supplement practical experience with theoretical, courses?
I think it's very important, but I think it's also important to actually space when you get those. I think lots of people leave university, they may work just for a year and then they go and do an MBA, or some people go straight from doing a BSc into doing an MBA. And I think that actually misses some of the point of an MBA. An MBA isn't just about what you get out of the classroom, it's about what you can also bring to the classroom. And when I went to do my MSc, which is almost like a mining MBA to a certain extent, we had a tremendous age range of people there, from people aged from 26 to 56. And it was that spread of age groups that really added something, I think, to the program. So I think it is important that you have a continual program of learning as anybody, not just as a leader in business, but anyone in business. Don't just think that when you leave school, that's it, it's all over and done with. I think you should constantly keep the brain active, and I certainly tried to do that, sometimes more successful than others.
You spent your first stint at Anglo-American was 24 years, and you were in many roles and many senior positions at Anglo-American. Why did you in 2002 decide to join Goldfields?
Well, I actually joined Goldfields in 1999, and the opportunity to become managing director of Goldfields was offered to me. At that stage, Goldfields was the amalgamation of the old Gen Gold assets as well as Goldfields of South Africa's gold assets to create Goldfields Limited as we know it today. It had been a pretty brutal merger. There was lots of blood on the floor, as it were. It was somewhat down and out. And I just thought that it was a tremendous challenge. It took me a long time to make the decision to leave Anglo Gold. I was very happy there. I'd had a long and sort of really interesting career, and I still think it's a great company today. But I just saw this as an opportunity to really create, or there was an opportunity here to really make a difference and to try and turn something around. I have to confess, after the first 2 weeks, I thought, my God, what have I done? Because it was going to be a really tough ask. But saw it through, and in the total of the 9 years that I had with Goldfields, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Taking a company and being part of a team that took a company from probably about 98% South African production, about 2.5 million ounces in total, to ultimately well over 4 million ounces, and about 55% domestic production, 45% international, represented on most of the continents around the globe, was really a tremendously personal and professional, satisfying experience, and one that I really enjoyed.
But you did raise some eyebrows when you went back to Anglo and not into the gold side, but into the coal side. How did that come about?
I'm a firm believer that chief executives shouldn't hang around forever. I think there's a natural shelf life, and I've always believed that's around about 5 to 7 years with a specific company. It's increasingly difficult after that period of time to make a real difference, and you're just fine-tuning. At the time when I decided to leave Goldfields, I saw that Goldfields was now moving into a new phase. We'd just acquired some new assets. I saw another phase of at least 4 to 5 years of major effort involved. And it was the next sort of cycle, as it were. If I'd have stayed for that cycle, I would have overstayed my welcome at the company. I think it's good for individuals to refresh themselves. I think it's good for companies to refresh themselves. I think it's good to take the skills that you've learned in one company and go to another company. Again, that's part of the learning process. So the opportunity to go back to Anglo American came about, and it was in an entirely different field. Again, something very challenging. I think, as you can see, there's a theme developing here. I mean, I don't just want to do something for the sake of doing it. It has to be something that would test, your personal abilities and such like. And the opportunity came along, and I decided to take it. And unfortunately, it didn't last that long. But in the sort of just under 2 years that I was there, I worked with a tremendously interesting group of people in the gold business, in the coal business of Anglo American, and some very, very smart people. And also, I think people tend to forget that the turnover in Anglo Coal was actually far higher than the turnover of Goldfields. It was also equally diverse globally. It had its challenges, and that really is what made it interesting for me.
There's a big difference between coal and gold, from a management side, definitely.
From a management side, I wouldn't say so. Running a business, you can be, I wouldn't say it's necessarily about being a professional manager or a professional leader, but the skills required to run a commodity business are pretty similar across a range of commodities. There are different aspects which are more important. I mean, clearly, the mining side of coal mining is probably far less demanding technically than gold mining, particularly deep-level gold mining. But the logistics side and the coal preparation side, the marketing side of coal, that is actually much more challenging, and really the area of where you require sort of a lot of time and effort and understanding. Again, there was an opportunity to learn something different. And I have to say, the short spell that I had within the coal business in Anglo-American certainly allowed me to sort of get a greater appreciation of the bulk commodity business, having spent most of my life in the precious metal sector.
But then you moved to Petmin, and there was a rumor that you had three job offers on your desk. How did you manage to pick Petmin, which is a small, at that stage, a small family-owned business?
When, as I say, when I suffered my unscheduled career change from Anglo-American, I had a very good conversation with a good friend of mine who I consider a bit of a guru to me. And he's an Australian individual. And he said to me, the first thing he said, don't take the first thing that comes along. Secondly, do an honest assessment of what it is that you think you're good at, what you're not good at, decide where you want to live, what you want to do. Do you want to be exec? Do you want to be non-exec? Really sort of almost craft for you what would be the ideal role. And we use this to say, well, an ideal position would be the following. I was offered, it was actually 32 firm offers that came my way. And I used the ideal sort of role as a kind of a template against which to evaluate the 32 roles. I narrowed it down to 4. What happened is at the Christmas time in 2009, the family got together around the table, and we sort of drew up this template. And we said, yes, no, definitely not, maybe, blah. And I realized that having really been involved in single role positions, there was a lot of opportunity out there to do some really interesting stuff. And I decided that taking on more of a portfolio of roles at this stage in my career would probably be more interesting. Back in 2010, it would have been more interesting to do that than just one specific role. I wanted to do something perhaps a little bit more entrepreneurial than just a straight corporate role. I was an existing non-exec director of Petmin. I was immensely impressed with the company, the people, what they wanted to do, how they went about doing things. There may have been a small company, but their corporate governance, their focus on value creation, and this entrepreneurial spirit and this almost clubby type atmosphere was so different from the large corporate world. I thought, again, this is something that might be interesting to do. It also allowed me the space to take on other opportunities, some other board roles. I'm on the board of Orica in Australia, which is the world's largest supplier of mining explosives. I also, with some family friends in the UK, we floated a gold company on the AIM back Christmas in 2010. It's called Hummingbird, and that's doing remarkably well in Liberia. In fact, Hummingbird and Petmin have created a relationship around an iron ore asset that Hummingbird have got. So I guess this is the stage in my life now where I'm using a lot of what I've learned over the last 36 odd years, contacts that I've developed, and using these to create interesting opportunities. And that's where I am, and I'm thoroughly enjoying myself.
You're not only, so involved in mining, you're also the chairman of the Leadership for Conservation in Africa organization. It's a non-profit organization which aims to stimulate conservation and lead sustainable development in Africa. Miners are usually the target of such organizations. How did you get involved in that?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do when I was still at school is I wanted to be a vet. So, I wanted to be a vet but landed up being a miner. So wildlife conservation is very much a passion of mine. And Goldfields has a long distinguished history of being associated with conservation and environmental causes. And it was whilst I was still the CEO of Goldfields that we were approached by Sandparks to become a core founding member of this issue or this project that we call the Leadership for Conservation in Africa, which is really all about looking at conservation projects that could create sustainable employment for people across Africa. The logic being it was all about conservation-led socioeconomic development. And so often you get conservationists who are very good at telling you 15 different types of butterfly that exist in an area, but have no clue how to commercialize that. You get lots of business people like myself who feel that they would like to put something back and are passionate about conservation, but don't really have the expertise in that field. And then clearly you have government that overlooks a lot of our national parks. So by creating this tripartite relationship between governments, business people and conservationists, and specifically looking at projects that are conservation linked, that can create employment opportunities for people across Africa, that was the, should we call it the vision that we had for the Leadership for Conservation. And 6 years later, we now have at least a dozen chapters of this organization dotted across Africa, several projects which are very advanced, including one, the Odzala National Park in Congo, Brazzaville, which is an area about half the size of the Kruger, and one of the world's last truly pristine rainforests with an immense biodiversity. And we were given the approval by the president of that country to put in place some lodges in there to create employment and to genuinely preserve the pristine nature of this park, because he was concerned it would just get cut down and logged. So by doing this, we're actually helping to preserve some of the green lungs of the world. We've got that. We're supporting other projects, some of the gorilla projects in Uganda, looking at cheetah projects in Namibia. So it's very interesting.
But the mining industry does not have a good name when it comes to the environment. Maybe I'm generalizing, but is there in the mining industry a cognizance of the importance of the environment? Is it just because it's in the media a lot more than in the past?
And clearly, I think everyone, not just in the mining sector, I think everybody is more conscious of preserving what we have today so our grandchildren can see the sort of things that you and I see. But the mining industry, going back 20-odd years, recognized that they needed to do more. The creation of the ICMM, which was really bringing together all the major mining groups in the world, that said we've got to do something to improve our approach to the environment, to make sure that we're much more responsible. And I would argue that over the last 10 to 20 years, the mining sector, the Western world mining sector, has certainly really raised its game. And I think if people have an environment where a mine can be developed, they should certainly be looking to those organizations and those companies that really are prepared to put forward, a good face in terms of environmental stewardship, because you don't want somebody to come in here, just dig a hole and leave it and just move on. Those days are gone, and I don't think anybody will support that. And you need to interact with your local communities. You need to get their support. You start there, because that's within the site of the headgear, as it were. You move out to the district, then to the country, and then ultimately globally, because you can't do something today in the back end of nowhere as a serious company and think you'll get away with bad management of that asset. It will impact you globally if you're a global company.
We're in the beginning of a new year, a lot of uncertainty around us. What do you think? What is your prospects for the year for Petmin as well as for yourself?
Look, I think if one looks on a macro level, I really don't think we're out the woods yet. I think that we're going to have some really volatile times. By nature, I'm the sort of guy who buys a stock and holds it. I think that we're moving into a period for the next several years, in fact. I mean, there's so much debt in the world. We haven't shaken that out of the system yet. And until that is resolved, until there's a much firmer financial footing, I think the developed Western world is going to have some real issues. We're seeing some signs of stability in the US. Europe, I think, is an absolute basket case. Britain is going through a torrid time, or they're taking the hard medicine, but still torrid. The developing world, the likes of China and India, I think will be slower than we've seen in terms of their growth, which is probably not a bad thing in terms of us in the natural resources sector being able to supply them with stuff. But there will still be growth there, and I think they will still keep us ticking over. But I don't think it's going to be as great as it's been over the last decade. I don't think the world is coming to an end, but I think investors, managers, companies really need to look long and hard at their businesses. I don't think this is a time to be hugely indebted. And certainly all these philosophies are things that we at Petmin are looking at. We're not an indebted company. And we've got strong cash flow producing assets. And I think those companies that are strong producers of their product at the lowest point in the cash production curve, that are not hugely indebted, and have got good people working for them, they will survive. But I think we're going to see a lot of casualties over the next few years. It's not a great time at the moment, I have to say. I'm less optimistic about the future than I have been for some time. But we will get through it. But it'll take a while yet.
Thank you, Ian. That was Ian Cockerill, the Executive Chairman of Petmin. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.